On the eve of early voting, a final poll gives Houston's incumbent mayor a commanding lead. What do the numbers tell us? And is there still time enough for a challenger to turn the tide? At the state capitol, the embattled House Speaker's ugly words revealed for all to hear. Will the fallout from a secret recording cost Republican Dennis Bonnen his position of power? And here at home, the city's financial watchdog defends his role in a land deal that put millions of public dollars in his pocket. Question now, will Houston voters give Chris Brown a pass for sneaky business? I'm Greg Rugen, and welcome to What's Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off, legendary reporter turned investigative media consultant Wayne Dolcefino. Next up, legal analyst and Houston attorney Carmen Rowe. In the 3 spot, Bob Price, associate editor of Breitbart, Texas. Batting cleanup today, Charles Blaine, founder and leader of the advocacy group Urban Reform. Next up, conservative lawyer and Second Amendment expert Michelle Maples. And closing us out on the hot corner, writer, educator, and radio host Antonio Diaz. Let's get to it. 16 days until the election, and we begin our show with a final snapshot of where the Houston electorate stands in the battle to lead the city for the next 4 years as mayor. Hot off the press, as we say, results of the University of Houston Hobby School of Public Affairs poll. It shows that despite a continuous barrage of criticism from a field of challengers, incumbent Mayor Sylvester Turner leads by a substantial double-digit margin with more than 43% of the likely vote. Turner is followed by well-funded trial attorney Tony Busby with about 23.5% of the vote. Businessman, columnist, and runner-up in the last mayoral race, Bill King, trails in third position with just under 8%, followed by Councilmember Dwight Boykins in fourth position and longtime public servant Sue Lovell in fifth. The Hobby Center poll determined just over 17% of voters are still undecided. Panelists dive right in. If these numbers are on target, Sylvester Turner is assured of a runoff spot and has a very solid chance to win the election outright on November 5th with 50% of the vote. Charles Blaine, I know you cover this. What do you make of these numbers?
I think a lot of people are shocked to see that this morning, especially to hear for the first time that there's a possibility he could win without a runoff. It's unbelievable. But I think when you dig into the numbers, it's a little more telling. One thing you're seeing is that I think it's 63.9% of African-American women are going for Turner. So either the challengers are missing the mark with their messaging on these voters, or they're just not engaging them. And I think it's probably the latter. I think they're failing to engage them because they talk about all the issues that would matter to anybody, whether it's flooding or crime or transportation and infrastructure. So I really think they're failing to engage these people, and they need to start. I mean, listen, it's getting really close. Tomorrow is the first day of early voting, so we're pushing up against a deadline. They need to do something now.
Carmen, we got an advanced peek at these numbers, and you've had a little time to I guess, vet them. What do you think? What do you think's happening?
I think people aren't watching the show enough because we've talked about Turner, we've talked about the problems, and I think if anyone thinks that their vote doesn't count, you know that it does if these numbers are really what we expect to see at the polls. So I would encourage everybody to get out and vote because these numbers don't reflect what we're seeing every day with these mayoral candidates. And so it's really surprising to see how much of a lead Turner has in this case. So,
okay, Tony, incumbent mayor, he's out in front of the public all the time. He's taken some hits, but I mean, that's huge, 43%.
Well, this is the incumbent's advantage, as well as candidates that aren't really getting to the public. This survey shows that a lot of his opponents don't have name recognition. On top of it, it looks like all of his opponents have to overperform for it to go to a runoff. The other thing I'm going to add too is no one wants to live in Gotham City. In the mudslinging and trying to make Houston sound terrible. I think just psychologically, we don't want to be in a city that is run down and overrun by crime. And I think people want to believe it because according to the survey, 57% of respondents believe that Houston's going in the right direction, which of course favors the candidate. And that's the status quo. The other thing I'm going to add as well too is I think with the Latino vote swinging, according to this poll, of over 40% towards towards Mayor Turner, that again is the incumbent advantage. And here's the difference. The difference is that I was at the Mexican-American Bar Association Houston Gala. I was happy to receive the Amicus Award. Thank you for that. Of course, Mayor Turner came, and he's supposed to pander to us, which he did very well. But here's what he had the advantage of. He could say, I have hired Latinos in important positions like Acevedo, like Peña, like Julius Stepech. And here's the other thing. His opponents can scoff at that. They've actually attacked some of these surrogates for him, but they haven't told us if they will replace those Latinos with other Latinos. And that's really it. It's like, let's get to find out who will be there standing for us when the person wins. And again, this approach helps the incumbent.
Okay, here we go. Last election, this is a Democratic city. This mayor used Busby's connection with Donald Trump effectively. What's your take on that?
All right, first my take is, can we get past like what flavor people are when we hire them? I mean, what Tony just said is, to me, what's wrong with this country is we're past this, okay? It doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter what color people are. If we're going to count like you hired 3 Hispanic people, so all of a sudden you're like the lover of the Hispanic community, it is nonsense.
So you're anti-Latino?
Yeah, Tony, I'm anti-Latino today.
Let's tweet that. Everybody, please tweet that.
Please, whatever. Look, the reality is, I think this poll's a little high for Turner. I think it's more like in the high 30s. I also think polls are more and more increasingly not that accurate. I'm not. The numbers on the bottom are pretty the same. I don't believe there a large amount of the Hispanic community is going for Turner. And look, the bottom line is most people do not pay attention. Most people shouldn't even vote anymore because, quite honestly, they don't know enough about what's going on. That guy has done nothing for the African American community in the last 4 years. And if I was running against him, I would spend the next 4 months documenting to the African American community specifically why this guy has not helped him, and in fact has helped a lot more of the downtown boys. And most of them, per Tony's like color count, are not black.
Well, you don't have that advantage of 4 months. It's coming up now. And that approach just doesn't work. At the end of the day, people are going to go with what they know versus what they don't know.
Oh, that's
Okay,
true.
wait a second. Wait a second.
Gotham City.
I happen to remember that both Bob and Wayne said the polls were wrong in 2016. Bob, what's your read on this?
Well, I think I agree with you on the polling on this. Yep. The Republicans are harder to poll than Democrats are. They are more prone to not answer the questions and not take the calls. So I think you'll see overperformance by Republican voters when the voting actually hits the fan. Tony's comments that you should hire people because they're Latino is absurd.
I pointed it out as a fact, not that you should.
Tony, I'm talking.
I think you're reading your own bias. Well, don't call me a liar. You're lying.
Hey, stop.
This is what Democrats do when Republicans make
chance.
points. They talk over the top of them. The fact is, when we're hiring a police chief, when we're hiring a fire chief, we should hire the best qualified person. If that person's Latino, that's great. If that person is black, that's great. If that person is white, that's great. If that person is Chinese, that's great. Let's get the best people in this city, and let's get rid of. Houston is a great city, but the Houston city government is corrupt, and that needs to stop.
Okay.
Also, I want to point something out.
Okay, quickly.
I didn't say we should hire only Latinos. I pointed out that that's what the mayor did. I also know that the structural racism, these Republicans need to recognize we're overcoming structural racism. They used to lynch Mexicans here in Texas. So get your facts straight and don't pretend it doesn't exist.
Let's get back to the mayor's race. Michelle Maples, what's your take on these numbers?
I think, like most of my conservative counterpoints, we were pretty disappointed to see that Turner has such a lead over the conservative candidates as well. However, what that means is that I think Charles nailed it on the head, is that Bill King, your Tony Busbys, are not reaching out to the communities who are absolutely active. And we know the African American community is one of the most active voting constituents in our nation. I mean, these churches are amazing places, and they advocate for these African Americans who frequent their churches to go out and vote. And I think that's what every single body needs to be doing. And I believe that some candidates have missed out on some great opportunities to hit these voters.
We're going to talk about it with our analysts later, but the poll does show that the mayor is polling about 60% of the African American vote. You looked at those numbers, Charles.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, you know, whether we looked at previous elections in Florida or New York or elsewhere, when you look at these urban areas, African Americans, particularly African American women, are carrying the day a lot of times because they're a solid voting bloc. And so you need to really reach out to them. And I know that there have been attempts, you know, minor attempts to some extent by these candidates, but there needs to be a kind of a full-fledged, robust attempt to do that. And also, I agree that, you know, Republicans are probably going to overperform on Election Day, but I think the poll even showed that Turner was polling like 13% of Republicans were going to support him. So I do think that there's this message, this narrative that's not carrying through. And back to the African American point, I think Turner's consistent attacks of being, you know, dog whistle politics and his opponents being racist really resonate with people because of the lack of engagement with those communities from those challengers.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there.